This is me and my motorcycle. And this is Thomas and his motorcycle. We have decided to go on a road trip this summer. His Yamaha Tenere is in excellent condition. My old Cagiva, not so much. I have a long list of things I need to do. Can I manage to get it fixed in time to the trip? It's time to take a look at the front of the bike. I have, as usual, updated my tasks lists, and I don't think the next tasks are going to be that difficult. The first thing is to take off the front wheel, and I've already prepared this front stand to make it easy to lift up the bike and support it, and to be able to work on the front part of the bike. I feel it's always a trade-off. Do you invest a lot of time on creating a very smart solution so you can reuse it and simplify the job the next time? Or do you just make up a solution there and then to quickly do the job? And normally something in between is the best to do, so you can save some time the next job you're gonna do, but not necessarily spend too much time on creating smart solutions, because hopefully it's not that often I'm gonna repair the front part of the bike. This solution, I would say, it's not optimal, but good enough. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know there is one thing I really hate about this bike and on any bike, and that is rusted parts. Fixing the brake is more or less just putting on new parts, but all the nuts and bolts and brackets and all the small stuff that is worn and rusted, I want to fix that and make the bike, if not look new, at least look to be in decent condition. And what you can see here is that the brake caliper is really stuck on here. Probably haven't been taken off since the bike was new 35 years ago. So spending 1 minute knocking on the bolt, as I do here, really helps to loosen bolts that is stuck. I will also be replacing the brake lines, so everything is gonna come off the bike, and even the front fender. It's not the original one, it's a service aftermarket fender, and I think the way it's put on is not optimal. I'll try to improve that as well. What you can see here though is an improvement I've already tested for 1 year. This clamp is not the original one. Let me show you on the other side. Here you can see how it was. Very convenient, just a handle and you can loosen it. Not a big deal, I'm not taking this off frequently anyway, but you can see it's not pretty, rusted and worn. So I've made my own 3D printed ones in plastic, and they have been working flawlessly now for 1 year. So here I'm putting on the other one on the other side, and one small improvement is already taken care of. And then it's time to do the cleaning. And this is a very important part of the job, if you ask me. It's no fun to work on a dirty bike, but you also get to see all the things that might be damaged, that you might not even see at the first glance. I started with a degreaser, then using rubbing compound, and finally a nylon sanding pad. These forks are quite worn and probably needs a paint job if they're gonna look as new, but this will have to do for now. Here are all the parts I will not be reusing. I have bought a new brake hose. The speedometer and tachometer cable will actually not be used going forward. And all these rusted parts will be replaced with new stuff going forward. I have also taken off the original instrument cluster, and I plan to replace this with a bit more modern solution, and I have a secret package here from Rock, but that will be in an upcoming video. Now it's time to take off the last big rusted piece from the motorcycle. Thanks a lot, Mr. Brake Disc, you have done a great job the last 35 years, but now it's time to retire. And also I wonder if the bearings are a bit worn. I had to replace some in the rear wheel, but actually they look to be in decent condition, and that is actually very great news. That means that I already have one item I can check off my to-do list. However, one job I don't even have on my to-do list is to fix this wheel hub. I don't mean just cleaning it. I noticed it is in so poor condition, I need to sand it down and paint it. This was a really tedious job, getting in between of all the nooks and crannies. This was not a fun job at all, but the painting, however. Changing the fork oil is pretty easy when the fork leg has a drain plug at the bottom. Oopsie, obviously not that easy. It's safe to say that this fork oil definitely need to change. It's thin as water, and looking at the color, I would guess this oil has maybe never been changed. But what really surprised me was when I drained the oil on the other side. The oil was in pretty decent condition, so that means previous owners had replaced fork oil on only one of the legs. I shouldn't be surprised, there's so many strange things showing up on this bike. And then finally, one of these joyful moments where I'm able to replace this rusted screw with a brand new shiny one. I'm actually using a stainless steel bolt here. That's not recommended when screwing it into an aluminium piece, but I'm adding a lot of Loctite here and hope maybe that is okay. Then it's just to fill up with half a liter of fresh new oil. I have to say, quite much more shiny than the original one. Come on. This is supposedly what you should do after filling up, to bleed out or to get out air of the system and make the fluid enter the appropriate chambers into the fork. Don't ask me, I don't really know how this works. It's really easy job, taking a few pieces apart and then putting them back together in the same order or the opposite order. Put it on the right way. Yeah, exactly. The right way, but the opposite order. Yes. Okay. Another task can be checked off the to-do list, and I'll actually even check off the first one there, which is replacing the brake disc and pads on the front wheel. Here you can see the freshly painted wheel, and unfortunately the brake pads I bought was the wrong type, so I ordered new ones. In the meantime, I will just be reusing the old one that I will freshen up a bit. They're not in perfect condition, but good enough until I get the new ones in a couple of weeks. The caliper is freshly painted, taken apart, lubricated, cleaned everything and put it back together. And then comes the jewel in the crown. Isn't it beautiful? Shiny new brake disc. Once again, I'm using stainless steel bolts, which actually is not recommended when screwing it into aluminium or some kind of aluminium alloy. I guess the hub is, but I'm putting on plenty of Loctite and I hope this makes it okay. Let me know if you think this is a terrible sin or if it's okay. It's not that big of a deal for me to replace it later if this is not something I should have done. I've already removed the stud bolts that was here. You can see they were rusted, and you know I don't like rusted stuff. Even though these are not visible, I want to replace them with brand new ones. I made this from some zinc-plated bolts I had, so for once I'm using the right type. I'm screwing on 2 nuts here at the end and uses that as a head just to get them inserted. I will also be using a lot of Loctite here to make sure they don't come loose. It's so nice to do these small, simple tasks. You just can't do it wrong, can you? Well, believe it or not, but you can. As I just had finished up on the other side, I remembered I had these spacers that goes in between. I'd even spent some time on cleaning them, removing rust and rust proofing them. Well, then it's just to do the job one more time, which is annoying. But can you tell me how to avoid this ever happen? I just think of it as repetition, and repetition is good learning. These spacers was actually some of the very few parts I had to reuse that needed rust removal and rust protection. So one more task checked off the list. And then comes a task I have been looking forward to. Then at the same time I'm a bit afraid of doing it wrong, because this is a non-reversible job. I want to modify this aftermarket Fender so it looks a bit more like the original one. And that means I'm gonna cut off, make it a bit slimmer. And also use the original mounts. Here you can see I'm putting on some markings where I think the correct location for the holes will be. And of course, this needs to be precise. If not, the Fender will be crooked. These need to be exactly at the correct position. What you will see now is me taking some measurements, drilling some holes, and start cutting away the Fender. In reality, I was going back and forth, double checking, triple checking, doing multiple iterations of measurements, taking the wheel on and off, spending at least half a day just trying to get all the measurements correct. The Fender I have is a bit more narrow than the distance between the fork legs, so I've 3D printed this spacer 6mm wide to fill out the gap, and this makes it also easier for me to get the exact correct distance. It's 50mm between the bolt holes. And this is the design I ended up with, so now I just hope that this will be looking okay on the bike. It's no going back after this. I've planned to use my small air-powered grinder for this job, starting first to test with a diamond blade. Then testing a regular cutting disc. And as you can see, I'm gonna put my big fat head in between here, so you can't really see much, but it cuts faster, but not as fine as with the diamond blade. So the winner is the diamond blade, and then it's just being steady on the hand and carefully cutting along the lines. I'm not sure if you can tell, but this is actually the first time I'm testing the Fender and I'm pretty nervous. Will it look decent? I made some of the holes a bit big, so I have a slight possibility to move it around. But before I put on the wheel, let me show you. This is the drive unit for the speedometer. This is broken. I destroyed it on my last trip because I used too thin of oil here, or not enough oil. This goes here, also acts like a spacer for the wheel. I have made my own using my Holzmann lathe. This is aluminium, just with a fraction of the original one. And I made, I think, a very smart solution, so I can put it a bit into the hole there. Makes it so much easier to put on the wheel, and it even holds the axle. And then comes the exciting time, putting on the wheel for the first time. Does this look okay? I haven't tightened the screws that holds the Fender yet, so I can move it a tiny bit around. It seems like a success when it comes to the mounting, but does it look okay? Perhaps it's easier to compare it to how it was before the modifications. And here you can even see the original bike, how it looked. So what do you think? Was my modification a success? Yes. It looks like the guy in the garage is happy. And yet another task is done. Then it's time to get the brakes back on the bike. I've prepared all the parts, painted the lid, rust-proofed the parts I need to reuse, and I have bought new brake lines from Goodrich. And I must say, this smells premium all the way. And I can't complain about the price either. Affordable and looks to be very nice. This part is original from the bike. I added a new rubber, and this is a 3D printed part. We'll look more about that later. In addition, what was included in the package was a set of fasteners and some stickers and a short user guide. When I am putting back on the brake parts, I like to fill them up with the brake fluid as much as I can. So this tiny small bottle is very useful to do that. What you can see here is me filling up the caliper as good as I can, knocking a bit on it, trying to get all the air bubbles out. Then putting on the fasteners. It might actually have been wrong of me to use a copper washer here. I think maybe it's better that the valve is seated at the bottom. Check in the description for a comment about this. Here I'm also filling up the hose with the brake fluid. And then trying to put it all together without spilling too much. And again, using Loctite to put things securely back on. I learned my lesson there after my trip, and multiple of my fasteners came loose. When you're driving on gravel road with an adventure biker, yeah, it's shaking a bit, and Loctite or lock nuts are very important. Then it's time to clean the disc using acetone, so there is no fat and grease on them. And here I noticed my 3D printed fastener was not optimal. I get a bit sharp bend on the hose there. Later in the video you will see how I solved this. Then it's just to fill up the reservoir with the brake fluid and hope that the bleeding process goes nicely. I'm pumping a bit of the fluid through the system here as well, trying again to remove as much air as possible from the system. I should probably have used gloves here, getting brake fluid all over my hands, but this is quite fiddly to get to enter, because it's very fine threads on this valve. I even had to take it off and put on a double set of washers, because the bolts was a bit too long. You can see a bit of the air is coming up on the upper side when I'm carefully pumping the brakes. And I also managed to get a bit of the air bubbles out of the system from the valve. But yeah, this did not work out. I could not get a proper pressure on the lever doing it like this. Normally I have success as long as I pre-fill the system with the brake fluid before I put it on. But this is the second option I use when this doesn't work out, and that is to have the brake caliper on the same height as the reservoir. And I'm making sure that the bleeding valve on the caliper is the highest point. It makes the job much easier also when you're alone to have the pump lever just beside the caliper. Makes the job go a bit faster. The bleeding process went much better using this method, but it still took me half an hour. And then it's just to put everything back into place. And here you can see my version 2 of the clip. I'm putting it on the inner part of the mounting as the original was, and I made it a bit slimmer as well. And I also put it in 20 degrees angle, so the hose had a much better position. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's so nice to put on cleaned, refreshed, repainted, or of course brand new parts. Even the bolts here are new, and it does look mint, doesn't it? The rubber boot I put on over the hose here is actually not included in the kit from Goodrich. I just found it on eBay. And that was actually the last task on my to-do list when it comes to fixing the front part of my Cagiva. And that is pretty nice. Just take a look at my Elefant. It's really getting to get into shape now. I'm just super happy about the front fixes. Most of the important tasks on my to-do list are now done, and I should be ready to go on a trip soon. Except, what about the instrument cluster? This package from U-Truck actually fits very well into the dashboard area. Perhaps take a sneak peek what's inside? I have actually partnered up with U-Truck, and they have sent me this motorcycle tablet. This is a very exciting device with extreme brightness and very good dust and water protection. Stay tuned for more content about this.